At Sephora, we've got what you want because you're obsessed with your skin and we're obsessed with what it needs. Sephora has the best products to help you get beautiful, glowing, radiant skin. With an extensive, inclusive range of results-driven formulas and in-store beauty advisors to help you find exactly which are right for you, the best skincare is only at Sephora. Sephora, for all your skincare.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Good afternoon. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party, as well as the County Chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. With us today is Eric Levine, our good friend, esteemed colleague, learned author, essayist, political commentator. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Welcome back to our show. My overarching theme, gentlemen, today, and we'll go through a whole bunch of topics, but my big theme is defending the indefensible. Evil is evil, as far as I'm concerned, period. There is no discussion. So I'm talking, obviously, about the war in Israel. And I'm talking about the apologists, the rationalizers, who cannot have the moral courage, the intellectual honesty to let the facts speak for themselves. You had all these innocent people were slaughtered. They were butchered. They were young. They were old. They were pregnant. They were infants. They were slaughtered. And what was their great crime? Their great crime was being Jews living in their own country, living in peace, not bothering anyone, who just happened to be there when Hamas, a terrorist organization, went in and slaughtered them. What makes it even more reprehensible to me, gentlemen, and then I'll open discussion for both of you, what makes it more reprehensible is the attempt to justify this. And you have people like Cornel West, a so-called professor at Harvard, debating Alan Dershowitz, the distinguished Harvard law professor, and he's kept telling Dershowitz, you have to understand the context. The context what? For slaughter of innocents? Is it a justification for doing this? Is it a rationalization? And then the kids in the schools backing the Palestinian group saying, well, this was okay. Hamas should have the whole land of Israel from the river to the sea, which would mean the total extermination of the country of Israel and the people of Israel. Eric, what do you say?
What can you say to that? There's a whole bunch of explanations for why we are seeing what we're seeing. But the core reason, as you correctly point out, is simple, grotesque anti-Semitism. It's been around. It's the longest form of hate in the history of mankind. And it rears its ugly head from time to time. Jews historically have been at their greatest risk when anti-Semitism is mainstreamed and becomes part of official government policy. We saw that in Spain during the Inquisition. We saw that in Nazi Germany. We saw it in in Tsarist Russia, and we saw it in the Soviet Union. And we are currently seeing it again today on the radical progressive left and the social justice movement. The social justice agenda is a mindless, racist, anti-Semitic agenda that basically stands for the proposition that there are oppressors and there are the oppressed. And the oppressed have every right to fight back with any means necessary. Whites are oppressors. People of color are oppressed. Jews are whites. The Palestinians are people of color. To the social justice warriors, every Palestinian is George Floyd, and every Israeli is Derek Chauvin. And therefore, they have every right to fight back with any means necessary. It's a mindless trope. It completely ignores history. It completely ignores facts. It completely ignores right versus wrong, good versus evil. But it's a simple trope. But to me, the more disturbing conduct is not the ignoramuses and morons that take to the street to support the Nazi slaughter by Hamas at the encouragement and organization and funding of Iran. To me, the more disturbing is the reaction from people who should know better. When you go to these college campuses, when George Floyd was murdered, college presidents, trustees, administrators, professors were falling over all over one another to condemn the killing. Rightly so. Students were given days off. Students were pardoned from taking tests because they were so upset about, even when Donald Trump was elected, they were so upset they got class days off. But that was okay. But now, what do we hear from many of these college professors, administrators, presidents, trustees? It has ranged from silence to mealy-mouthed moral equivalence to an occasional condemnation, with always the caveat, but we have to see the other side. To my knowledge, Ben Sasse from the University of Florida is the only college president that came out clearly and said there's right versus wrong, there's good versus evil. This was evil. We stand with Israel, period, end of sentence. But you don't hear that. And that is really the danger of the social justice agenda, because it is racist and anti-Semitic, even in the way that it's first described when you view everything through the lens of race. By trying to pigeonhole Jews into the idea that Jews are a race, it denies Israel the right to exist, because nations get states, not races. And who was the first, and who were the groups that always try to identify Jews as a race? The Spaniards during the Inquisition, Nazi Germany, Tsarist Russia, the Soviet Union. The same most anti-Semitic governments that mainstreamed anti-Semitism always try to treat Jews as a race. And now the radical left and the social justice agenda is trying to do the same thing. And we are seeing it mainstreamed. How are we seeing it mainstreamed? Not just on our college campuses, but when people like AOC and Rashida Tlaib and the rest of the squad morons are free to espouse some of the most vile anti-Semitic tropes, and there's no condemnation whatsoever from the President of the United States. An occasional tisk-tisk from Chuck Schumer, who really has a lot to explain. And when Joe Biden and other supposedly moderate Democrats are afraid to offend the progressive left because they want to get reelected or they don't want to have a primary challenge, they enable these anti-Semites. That's part of the reason we've moved so dramatically in this country. You see in the Democratic Party, it's almost a 50-50 split now between support for the Palestinians and support for the Israelis. Among independents and Republicans, somewhere between 75 and 80% Israelis versus Palestinians. It makes a big difference. So we really need to stop mainstreaming anti-Semitism. The way to stop mainstreaming anti-Semitism is to attack the heart of the social justice agenda. Get it out of our schools, get it out of our places of business, make sure that people who run on that platform lose, and speak out against it. And a group that has a lot to answer for in this regard are synagogues and temples and Jews. If you go to Reform and conservative temples around the country, many of them have social justice committees. A lot of rabbis teach the concept of tikkun olam, to save the world, but it really is just a veiled way of teaching progressive politics. We need to get out of that business. Rabbis need to teach Torah and not progressive politics. We need to recognize the social justice movement for what it is, and we need to crush it. And I think that in large part explains why we are seeing what we are seeing. But the biggest danger of all is when you have mealy-mouthed responses from people like college presidents. When someone asks you, can the Holocaust happen again? You're damn right it can.
Jesse, your thoughts?
In this time, in this very bleak time, the consequences of the social justice that Eric and yourself spoke about, of that agenda, that far left agenda, is now coming to bear. This is, as both of you have pointed out, this is not about Israelis versus Muslims or anything. This is about good versus evil. This is about a free society being attacked by animals. And they're being assisted, as we pointed out in the first few minutes of this broadcast, by academia, mainstream media, and the whole sorts of these, but progressive leftist individuals as well. Because we cannot let the anti-Semitism go without being checked. It cannot go without being blurted out, and it needs to be stopped, or else silence is allowing it to grow and fester, and that's what we're seeing. On the unfortunate consequences we're dealing with now, I think may have, and I hope it does have, and it continues to have, some positive recourse of maybe adjusting and removing these social justice agendas, this far left social justice agenda, from, as you said, Eric, and Your Honor, from our businesses, our colleges, and our schools, in all forms. Because unfortunately, the way that's going to be happening is what we're seeing now. It's being done through money, donations, and alumni. We are seeing universities such as Harvard and UPenn suffering now financially for them advocating and allowing, for the almost grandizing or allowing the second side of this heinous attack by the Hamas on the Israeli people. And let's just always be reminded of what we're talking about in this attack. These were these were hundreds of Israelis enjoying a concert. These were women being raped, families being slaughtered, children being slaughtered,
beheaded
as well.
Children being
beheaded and caged. This is not humane. These are animals. And to be silent or saying we have to allow the second, the other side to be heard. No, you're absolutely right. The Florida college president was absolutely correct. And it's not just, it's a period stop at that moment. It's a period and stop. Not explanation, not appeasement, not any of that. And I don't mean to make this political, but this is bigger than politics. This is society. This is a fight between good and evil. But these are the same college presidents that would shut down a conservative voice to be heard on their campuses, but yet let proponents of Hamas and what they have done to the Israeli people move forward. It's wrong. It's wrong-headed. It's not right. And unfortunately, in this big time, and it took this step for it to come forward and consequences to emerge. But I'm wholly hoping that the actions of these alumni, the financial community, those that are important to these universities, that those university presidents and academia get the message that they've gone too far and they need to bring an end to the social justice left agenda.
Well, I have to say, fundamentally what you're seeing here, in my opinion, is you're blaming the victim, you're ignoring the atrocities of the evildoers, and then you're making these morally equivalent arguments that you have to somehow, Israel, in its response to this, to an existential threat, where Iran is now making noises about escalating this war. First, it denies it had anything to do with it, as if Hamas, having been armed, having been financed, and having been trained by Iran, all of a sudden, Iran is surprised that this happened. Well, maybe they didn't tell them that the attack was going to have on a particular day, at a particular time, trying to give Iran plausible deniability. But the short answer is there is no plausible deniability because they're responsible for arming, training, and financing them. They're the ones who've created these terrorist groups and made sure that they're viable threats to civilization.
Well, both the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal have reported that there were meetings in Lebanon in the weeks leading up to the war between Iran, Hamas, and Hezbollah. This notion that Iran was surprised, I reject out of hand.
I agree.
And when you listen to the administration, this is where Joe Biden has completely dropped the ball. You know, he's been very supportive of Israel since the day the attack occurred. Leading up to it, his policies have been absolutely insane. But this idea of trying to explain away or distance Iran from the attack so that they can save the Iran nuclear deal is really obscene.
Indeed it is. All right, we have to take a break. We'll be back in a moment. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, Eric Levine, noted commentator, essayist, and attorney. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Please stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.
If you're having problems with your septic system and you're tired of spending so much money each year to have it pumped, then SeptiClean is the answer for you. SeptiClean is an advanced specially formulated blend of bacteria used in the treatment of home and commercial septic systems. The breakdown of waste in your system relies on biological activity of naturally occurring bacteria. SeptiClean restores the natural biological process in your septic system and boosts the existing biological activity. SeptiClean is completely safe on all plumbing and can help prevent expensive emergencies in pumping. SeptiClean has approximately 6 to 100 times the bacteria count of other leading off-the-shelf brands in a 1-year supply. SeptiClean comes in a water-soluble pack, which you flush down the toilet once a month with no mess or stress. Save time, money, and maintenance on your septic system. Find SeptiClean at Emporium True Value Hardware on Main Street in Sag Harbor or visit micro-tab.com. That's micro-tabb.com. Micro-tabb.com.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Not everyone is careful with your personal information, which might explain why there's a victim of identity theft every 5 seconds in the U.S. Fortunately, there's LifeLock. LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats to your identity. If your identity is stolen, a U.S.-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year by visiting lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply. This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability. ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show. Let me lay out a startling proposition to you gentlemen. In my humble opinion, Obama, his Secretary of State Kerry, Biden, and his Secretary Blinken have sold out America and Israel. What do I mean by that? From the very, very beginning, and by the way, it started much earlier than the Obama. Carter is the one who allowed the Ayatollah to come back from Paris to go to Iran, selling out the Shah, being weak-kneed, not having any intellectual moral strength to back an ally, a strong ally of the United States, the Shah. And then the fundamentalists came in, took over a country, and subjugated the entire population with their extreme Islamic fundamentalism. And when they shout death to Israel and death to America, they mean it. And so anyone who believes that somehow you can placate these people, somehow you can appease these people, somehow you can moderate their behavior by giving them tons of money and allowing them to sell oil and make money off those oil sales, and look the other way when they fund and train terrorist organizations and everything is going to be okay, they're out of their minds. And as Jesse pointed out in the first segment, they have allowed this to go forward. They have allowed this to happen. They are responsible for this. There is no deal that you can make with people who are dedicated to your destruction. Hamas's charter is very, very clear. They want control of Israel from the river to the sea. That means the extermination of the Jewish people in Israel and the abolition, the total destruction of the state of Israel. They don't want a two-party solution. They don't want to moderate their behavior. They want to win it all. And this is a threat, not just to Israel, but to the United States of America and to Western civilization. Eric.
So I think we should distinguish between what Carter did and what Obama did. Carter was inept. He was incompetent. He overemphasized the concept of human rights in that region. He did not understand fully that violations of human rights are endemic to that region. And we see, the Shah and the Savak, which is secret police, were brutal. But of course, we know that the Ayatollahs and the secret police in current day Islamic Iran is far worse. But at the time the Shah fell and Khomeini was let out of Paris and returned to Tehran, it was not clear that the Shah, that the mullahs would take power. There was a big power struggle for a few months. Actually, for a very short period of time, there was a democracy in place, and eventually the mullahs took over. So I don't think there was a conscious effort by Carter to put the mullahs in charge. I just think he completely underestimated the powers of the mullahs and foolishly overemphasized human rights when things could only really get worse. Obama made the absolute conscious decision with John Kerry to shift America's policy in the Middle East from an Israeli-centered, oriented Middle East policy to an Iranian-centered Middle East policy. That was consciously done. And why did he do that? In large part, it is motivated by the social justice agenda. It is the internationalization of the social justice agenda of viewing everything through race and gender. In Obama's mind, America is a systemically racist country. And when you project power abroad with American military might, you are projecting that same systemic racism, and therefore American power must be restrained. Oppressed versus oppressors. In the 1950s, in Obama's mind, ahistorical, of course, that the United States led a coup against Mossadegh, the then prime minister of Iran, to overthrow him, to put the Shah in power. And that was a sin for which the United States had to atone. Remember, the first thing Obama did when he was elected, he went on this apology tour. And among the things that America had to apologize and a sin for which it had to atone was overthrowing Mossadegh and replacing him with the Shah. The way to do that is to now reward Iran, punish Israel, punish the United States, and shift the focus of American foreign policy in the Middle East to Iran. And that really is what explains, in large part, I think the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal. Because if it was a great deal, as everyone claimed it was, because of course Obama told us he would only make a good deal, so it must be a good deal. Why did they have to lie to us at every step of the way about what this deal was about? Why did they have to lie to us and say, as John Kerry did and Barack Obama did, and Jack Lew, the nominee to become America's ambassador to Israel? We can talk about that in a little bit. Why did they have to say that the JCPOA blocked all paths to a nuclear weapon, when in fact it created a legal path to a nuclear weapon? By its own terms, by 2030, all restraints on uranium enrichment would be lifted. When Obama became president, it was against international law for Iran to enrich any uranium. He lifted that. He allowed them to begin to enrich uranium. And in 2030, there are no limits. There used to be a ballistic missile ban, development ban against Iran in the United Nations. Obama lifted that. Why lie to us about that? They went around telling us we'll all remember that anywhere, anytime inspections. But they forgot to tell us that military sites were not permitted to be inspected. So where do you think the Iranians developed their nuclear capability? We were told that Iran would become part of, when we give them all this money, they would become part of the community of nations. They become a normal actor. That was a lie. If this was such a wonderful deal, if it was in America's interest to do it, why not be honest with the American people about what was in the deal? And if it was such a great deal, why not follow the Constitution, send it to the Senate for approval?
After all, it was a treaty.
Right. You need 67 votes in order for it to be ratified as a treaty and become part of American law. He didn't do that. He turned it on its head. In fact, he created a situation where it required 67 votes in the Senate to block the deal. There was overwhelming bipartisan opposition to this deal, but he rammed it down our throats. If it was such a great deal, why lie? And if it was such a great deal, why not make the pitch to the American people and the Senate and sell it? Why? Because he knew it would fail. And if you're going to advance the social justice agenda, which is unpopular in most segments of American society, even today, you have to lie about it. You have to pretend it's something other than it is. So a lot of what we're seeing going on today, Barack Obama is really the architect of the Hamas war. Because once you started funding Iran with $150 billion, they were off to the races in building the military, building a nuclear weapon, building the ballistic missiles, and most importantly, funding and growing their network of terrorism. They were before and they are now the single largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. And that makes Joe Biden's efforts to revitalize that deal even more insane, because even if you thought Obama was being honest then, you knew what happened and you're just repeating the mistake.
Jesse.
I think it's very clear that we know it's a mistake. The Biden administration knows the mistake because they are not mentioning Iran at all. Everything that you and Eric have detailed, let's just go forward one more time. The $6 billion deal they did for hostages, that one was panned by everyone, and we're dealing with those type of consequences right now. Those that now they're trying to crawl back those assets. It was the Boston Herald editorial staff just a few days ago who basically stated that started off their editorial by saying, once again, Joe Biden's blunders have had deadly consequences. And that encapsulates his foreign policy in the Middle East and quite frankly, his foreign policy all over the last 2.5 years. This administration has shown no firm grip on how money works or what the money is being used for. You can almost connect the dots, theoretically or actually, on the use of the release of the billions of dollars the United States has given Iran, and that went funding to these Hamas militants. Their approach in the Middle East, as we both have said, being from an Israeli based to almost being an Israeli opponent, is costing us dearly, globally, but certainly in that region. There's no way that their approach can be described in any manner, shape, or form as even partially successful or as neutral. It's an utter failure. And they've done it because they've trusted people that cannot be trusted. I mean, when you're being called out by editorial staffs, by a bipartisan group of senators and elected officials about the so-called transfer of Iranian funds to be halted, it demonstrates what it has here. And we've seen it in other places. We've seen Iran, as you pointed out, the largest state-sponsored terror organization. They've been involved with building drones for Russia. They're involved with China, and they're trying to seek even further grasp into the region by saber rattling and saying that a third world war has been declared by Israel, which it has not been. This has been engineered by Iran, its motives, and the feckless foreign policy of the Biden administration.
That's very well said, because let me just say this. Who are the winners by this attack by Hamas? It gets the Ukrainian war, the war of aggression by Russia against Ukraine, off the front pages. It allows China to make its moves against Taiwan because nobody's paying attention to that. It allows the diversion of Israeli resources to protect itself against a possible move against the Iran nuclear sites. So the big winners here are Iran and Russia and China, and the losers are the United States, Israel, and Western civilization. Eric.
So, Jesse, the point you were making about the money, even the $6 billion, what is the explanation? John Kirby, this guy needs to get off the stage. The man must have absolutely no conscience or no self-awareness because he says
they do not pay him enough.
The things he says are just so divorced from reality. From my perch, the Afghanistan withdrawal went well. The $6 billion, he was poo-pooing the argument that the $6 billion was used. This explains why our economy is in such a crapper, because they don't understand the concept of fungibility. They have the $6 billion. Now Iran says, okay, great. I have the $6 billion that I no longer have to allocate towards food and medicine. I can now take that $6 billion and give it to the IRGC. I can give it to Hamas. I can give it to Hezbollah. I can give it to a bunch of proxies to shoot at Americans. That's another thing that we don't talk about a lot. There have been over 83 attacks against American service members in Syria and Iraq by Iran directly and their proxies. We've retaliated at the most 4 times against some jihadis that nobody cares about. And what does the Biden administration do? They actually do, Jesse. I don't think you're correct on this. They actually do mention Iran, but in a way to exculpate them. They admit that Iran funds them. They admit Iran trains them. They admit Iran gives them political cover. But, quote unquote, they don't see any signs of direct Iranian involvement. What, the Ayatollah didn't take a sword and say, charge and run across the Israeli border? I mean, these statements are so insulting to anyone who's sensate. Of course, Iran is responsible for this. This has to end with regime change in Iran. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. And it's in America's interest, most of all, to make sure that happens.
Jesse, I want to get your thoughts. You and I have been talking for a long time about the axis of evil. And I submit to you that it's only gotten stronger since Biden has taken over the White House. And the U.S. is only getting weaker. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts is absolutely true. It has been the Biden administration's fumbling of foreign policy, basically removing the United States from a leadership position on foreign policy and around the globe, that has allowed a vacuum to be created. And what happens when vacuums are created? Someone or some entity is going to fill those vacuums. And that's exactly what it has happened here with China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. They are Venezuela, and the emergence now of Cuba and its partnership with China on surveillance. It has been this foreign policy that has been bungled from day one. It has been more of an appeasement, and back, as Eric pointed out earlier, it's almost like the apology tour, but we're not saying apologies. We're doing apologies, and by our actions. And the action is removal of American leadership on the global stage. And it's allowing our enemies to infiltrate regions that were beyond their grasp because of the presence of America and American diplomats and armed forces. You know, it goes back to Teddy Roosevelt's, peace through carry a big stick, peace through carrying a big stick. That's how you get it, or Ronald Reagan, peace through strength. We don't have that anymore. It seems that Democrats, especially in the last 30 years, have been walking away from that approach. I don't know why. I don't know if it's just in their DNA, but it has failed whenever their leadership positions. They've had the presidency and leadership positions, and it's had to be others that have called it back. Say what you will about Donald Trump, and I find this ironic, and I don't know if you gentlemen find this ironic. During his statements, Secretary Antony Blinken was standing in front of and in the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. Do you remember when President Trump was attacked for moving the American embassy to Jerusalem by Democrats and everyone alike. And here is our Secretary of State standing in front of probably the facility he criticized. The Democrats' approach to foreign policy has made this country less safer. It's encroaching upon our hemisphere, and it's making the world a more graver place.
Agreed. We have to take a break. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, Eric Levine, noted attorney, commentator, and political essayist. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Please stay with us. We'll be back in a moment for more interesting conversation on Let the Record Show.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
This is Let the Record Show. We are back with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, Eric Levine, noted attorney, commentator, political essayist. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. I just want to share a couple of thoughts, and I want to turn this over to Jesse. I think, and I'm the House Democrat. Always remember, I'm the House Democrat. Even though
nobody believes that.
Nobody believes that. It's because because the introduction always is I'm the common sense Democrat, which makes me sound like a Republican, I guess. But the point is, I thought Kevin McCarthy was an excellent speaker, and he did the right thing. He acted in a bipartisan way. He raised the debt limit, so he didn't have a crisis of that. He did a continuing resolution with the Democrats, again, a bipartisan deal, which was a very good thing to do. So we didn't have to close down the government. And he gets sabotaged by this lunatic fringe on the extreme right of the Republican Party, led by a colossal narcissistic idiot, this Getz character, who I frankly, maybe I'm giving my age away, I think he's nothing but a loudmouth punk kid who knows nothing. He sabotages McCarthy. And this time, when we need Congress to be strong, there are investigations against the Biden influence peddling that have been stymied. You can't go forward on them because you can't issue subpoenas. And we have to fund Ukraine. We have to fund Israel. We have to do important legislation. And we can't do it because there's no leadership in Congress, and Jordan has just lost his second round in the speakership. Jesse, your thoughts?
My thoughts is that it's messy, it's embarrassing, and unfortunately, it was a clown car that took us to this point. I am hopeful that the Republican majority will get its act together. They need to work cohesively, so as we can address the issues that you has talked about. We're talking about disaster aid. We're talking about supporting our allies in Israel and around the globe. And none of that work can get done until we have a compromise on our speaker. It's difficult with a majority this small to get everyone together. But I think to go back to what got us here, the House of Representatives and the Congress as a whole has always been created as an entity that it would stop the country from lurching from far extremes to the other. It was constructed or established for the purposes of, bringing differing sides together and compromising for the good of the nation. Unfortunately, we have not seen a lot of that. And, we could say that the Democratic caucus should have protected the institution and not allowed a clown car mentality to take out a speaker such as Speaker McCarthy. But still, I call upon the fact that it's the Republican majority and the Republican caucus that has to get its acts together. They've got to put aside their cheap and petty politics to put the work of America forward. I am hopeful. We're still in a stalemate for the second or third week on this matter. While a lot of important work needs to get done, it certainly is not a good look across the nation. It's not a good look across the world of what we are right now. But I still am hopeful that cooler heads and straight heads, common sense, will prevail, and we move forward with leadership and policies and procedures that will prevent this from moving and happening again. We're sabotaging the institution of the House of Representatives.
I agree with that. Eric?
Kevin McCarthy, yes, he was an excellent leader while he was there, but he made the tragic mistake of making the concession to Matt Gaetz that when for Getz's vote to begin with.
The motion to vacate.
The motion to vacate one person. When Nancy
right.
Pelosi had a narrow majority, I believe it required 21 votes.
That's right.
To vote to vacate the chair. And it's very dangerous for the Republicans to put someone like Jim Jordan, make him speaker. I understand the need for it. I understand the argument for the need for it. But if you go with Jim Jordan after Steve Scalise had won, and Steve Scalise was not perceived as a Getz ally, it makes it appear as if Getz has won. It makes it appear as the people that have just recently escaped from insane asylums and forgot to take their medication are running the House. And that's really just not a good thing. It's an open question whether or not the Republicans have so damaged themselves that they have no hope of holding a majority in the House in 24. I have my doubts about that. But they're going to have to coalesce around someone who can compromise, someone who can reach across the, not just reach across the aisle, but more importantly, be able to bring together the entire coalition, the Republican caucus. And I'm just not sure who that is right now. I mean, I think the best scenario is to go back to Kevin McCarthy if you can.
Oh, amen to that.
Put his name back up there again and make Getz and co. eat crow. But I'm just not sure how we extricate ourselves from this.
Well, I want to get your thoughts on this, Jesse. It seems to me that if the Democrats want to look like they're reasonable, sane, responsible people, Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader of the Democrats in the House, he should have supported McCarthy at the very, very beginning of this process against the radical fringe Republicans, and that would have marginalized them as well as marginalizing his own squad, which are crazy left apologists for terrorism.
But he wants to be Speaker in 24.
Well, but he could have run as a candidate of responsibility and statesmanship. He could have supported McCarthy by just telling his people to not show up for the vote or vote to vote present, and then the overwhelming members of the Republican caucus would have voted down this gang of lunatic 8. That's what he could have done. And he owed it to McCarthy because McCarthy worked with him in a bipartisan way to raise the debt ceiling and to pass a continuing resolution. So he diminished himself and he diminished the integrity and the reputation of the Democratic Party as well. Democratic parties could have stood up for the integrity of the institution, their responsibility to do a good job for America, and they failed in that opportunity. So
I think that Hakeem Jeffries did exactly what he wanted to do.
Which is a short-term political advantage.
I agree with that. Well, yeah, because if the other side is in a circular firing squad, don't get in the middle.
Why get in the middle of it? Exactly. And quite frankly, as a Republican leader, I shouldn't need the help of the opposition party to save myself. Let's not also lose the fact that this Matt Gaetz, Kevin McCarthy issue is deeply personal. Deeply personal. It goes beyond politics, procedures, and so on and so forth. This is something that has been brewing, and unfortunately, this clown car group got the best of them. I'm not sure if McCarthy will come back or can come back, and I think when this show airs, they'll probably be recessing until Monday, Tuesday for another vote. But at one point or another, there's going to need to be a consensus amongst the Republican majority, and they have to get their act together. And listen, it's very simple. The members from Long Island are looking to get some concessions as well. They were with McCarthy when the clown car knocked him out. And as Jordan was coming forward, they were in discussions with them to get the issues that were important to Long Island on the table that Jim Jordan has opposed in the past.
For example, the SALT deductions.
The SALT adoption, that's one of them. Making sure that 9/11 responders and the healthcare, the health program continues. Jim Jordan, he has evolved, but also voted against Sandy aid and voted against 9/11 aid. So, there's some issues there.
And he's voted against Ukraine, and he's a big Trump supporter, and he's a January 6th apologist. He's an election denier.
I'm just speaking about the issues of Long Island. For the two or three members of the House of Representatives that are representing Long Island, which if they're going to take a difficult vote, they need to make sure that Long Island and New York is protected. So I think that they're taking the stance that they feel that they need to do. Eventually, this is going to get done. When that eventually comes, I can't tell you. I don't have a crystal ball. But I believe that cooler heads will prevail in this. It's just, I don't see it right now. I don't see an emerging candidate. And if I'm not mistaken, and please allow me to be educated here, but before Pelosi, wasn't there just the one vote vacate rule in place? I think it was Pelosi that removed it because I think she was in danger of herself.
I think you're absolutely right, Jesse. I think that's exactly what happened.
I mean, McCarthy, while he made a tactical, maybe a tactical mistake with a slim majority, really brought back the House of Representatives procedures to where they have been for many years. I
think that's right. That's my recollection. All right, we've gotten the sign. We have to take a break. This is Let the Record Show. We'll be back in a few moments. Please stay with us. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party and Eric Levine, noted attorney, essayist, and political commentator. We'll be back in just a few moments.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, Eric Levine, noted attorney, essayist, political commentator. So at the break, I mentioned to you, gentlemen, that we had dinner last night with Governor Doug Burgum of North Dakota, who's a presidential candidate in the Republican sweepstakes, who's a very impressive guy, very, very smart, very articulate, very knowledgeable, self-made man, came from very humble origins and made himself a wealthy man, became governor of North Dakota, led a very effective regime there, very knowledgeable about national security, energy, the economy. It was just wonderful to listen to him and have a conversation with him. But he told the following story, and I want to get the thoughts of you two gentlemen on this. Jesse and I and Eric have been talking a lot about world affairs. But world affairs impinge on our national affairs, and nothing does that more than the open border. And what Governor Burgum told us the story was as follows. There was an incident in North Dakota, and one doesn't think of North Dakota necessarily as being a terrorist target, where some Mideastern person who jumped the border, had a car full of munitions, was looking for a site to have a terrorist attack, got involved in a gun battle, was killed himself, and unfortunately killed a police officer. The open border, what a nightmare that is. Jesse, your thoughts?
The fact that this is an open, I mean, we discussed this last week, if I'm not mistaken. You know, the Biden border policy or lack of border policy has allowed easy and direct access from our enemies, whether it be China through fentanyl, whether it be those of Hamas who want to call over and bring this war to our shores and bring it to our streets. We are a border town everywhere. Every community is a border town because of the acts of the Biden administration. This example you give is clearly and most evident. You can't argue with that whatsoever. We have cartels, a humanitarian crisis, a human trafficking crisis moving forward, and they want to continue to try to take a blind eye to this. But it's their own personnel that's talking about this. We spoke about this last week. I think I brought it up, where U.S. Border Patrol and park officers can see across the border a tent city put up, and what they declare as Syrians and whatnot, mobilizing there and then disappearing, and then more men show up. They're coming across our border to bring what you just pointed out. You know, having a car full of munitions to bring this terror to our streets. And that's where we have had to bear the burden in communities like Suffolk County, Long Island, of this failed border approach by the Biden administration.
Eric.
I think we talked about it last week. I mean, we know that foreign countries that want to do us bad and do us evil are in our hemisphere. Iran is here. Hezbollah is in Venezuela. China is in Cuba. Russia is in Cuba. And the drug cartels make arrangements with these countries. Hezbollah is one of the world's leading drug pushers. And they are in Venezuela. And there is no shortage of Venezuelan illegal refugees, illegal aliens coming across our border. They're picking up Syrians. They're picking up people from Yemen. They're picking up folks from North Africa.
Lebanon.
Lebanon.
And Iran.
And Iran. So it's a very serious national security issue. And these are the people that we catch. What about the people we don't catch? There's got to be, we know there's no shortage of those. We just don't know who they are or where they are or what we're doing. This suicide pact we've made with ourselves about having an open border is just insane.
Jesse, final thoughts.
Final thoughts are, as we've discussed, American leadership abroad and American leadership domestically has been another failure. It has been another failure economically, on an education scale. And what it's doing now, it's a national security measure that's really a clear and present danger to the very society we have loved here for so many much, and we live here. It's in our oaths. It's in our DNA, and changes need to occur dramatically. And maybe Israel is the point of that spear right now. Perhaps it is Israel that is the one that is going to take the lead on the good versus evil. And just as we close, I need to say this because we hosted a prayer breakfast when we taped this show in honor of our Suffolk County executive candidate, Ed Romaine. And there was an imam, a rabbi, and a pastor, all three together, all saying one thing, one message: peace, harmony, and unity. These three men, who represent tens of thousands of people, get it right. They got it right when they said that this is a fight between good and evil, not amongst people.
Well,
our government, our leadership needs to understand that and back that up wherever evil is going to try and overtake good, whether it's in the Gaza with Israel or in Ukraine or anywhere else.
To paraphrase a concept that I really believe in, all it takes for evil to triumph over good is for good men to do nothing. And I believe that this moral equivalency, this media mob that says, for example, on the bombing of this hospital in Gaza, the first thing the media mob does, they blame it on Israel. It now is turning out that that's not necessarily true. In fact, the record seems to show, the documents seem to show, the audio of the Islamic Jihad seems to show, and the pictures seem to show that, in fact, it was a misguided missile from Islamic Jihad, but yet everybody jumped all over Israel.
Let's be clear. Within 8 minutes of the hospital being bombed, the New York Times ran an article blaming Israel for the bombing of the hospital.
So
that is unreal.
Within 8 minutes,
right.
And they still have not retracted it.
That's right. And so what does that do? It gives ammunition in the propaganda war against the good in favor of the evil. And so the New York Times has failed in its moral responsibility, its intellectual responsibility.
What a shock.
I want to thank you, gentlemen. Chairman Garcia of the Republican Party, Eric Levine, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Thank you for listening. Look forward to being with you again next week. God bless you. God bless your families. God bless Israel. And God bless America. Thanks again. Well done.
If you're having problems with your septic system and you're tired of spending so much money each year to have it pumped, then SeptiClean is the answer for you. SeptiClean is an advanced specially formulated blend of bacteria used in the treatment of home and commercial septic systems. The breakdown of waste in your system relies on biological activity of naturally occurring bacteria. SeptiClean restores the natural biological process in your septic system and boosts the existing biological activity. SeptiClean is completely safe on all plumbing and can help prevent prevent expensive emergencies in pumping. SeptiClean has approximately 6 to 100 times the bacteria count of other leading off-the-shelf brands in a 1-year supply. SeptiClean comes in a water-soluble pack, which you flush down the toilet once a month with no mess or stress. Save time, money, and maintenance on your septic system. Find SeptiClean at Emporium True Value Hardware on Main Street in Sag Harbor, or visit micro-tab.com. That's micro-tabb.com. Micro-tabb.com.